The group text arrived with 3 heart emojis and a promise that felt like a miracle. A fully paid Hawaii vacation for all the grandchildren. My 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, immediately started making a paper lei, and I foolishly let my guard down. I should have known that in my family. Generosity is never a gift. It is a weapon. This trip wasn't a vacation. It was a reward for the ones who obeyed, and a punishment for the one who didn't. The vibration of my phone against the granite countertop was a short, sharp buzz, the kind that usually signaled a spam call or a weather alert. I was wiping down the remains of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, my mind drifting between the laundry pile waiting upstairs and the deadline for a freelance article I had promised an editor by Friday. It was a Tuesday afternoon, typical and gray, the kind of day where the clouds hung low over the suburbs and the air felt heavy with unspoken rain. I dried my hands on a dish towel and picked up the phone. It was a group text. The thread title had been changed. Bold and bright at the top of the screen, Grandkids Hawaii Adventure. My stomach did a small, involuntary flip. The sender was my mother, Diane. Below the title was a wall of text, punctuated by an aggressive amount of palm tree and hibiscus emojis. My darling family. The message read, Dad and I have decided it is time for a big treat. We are taking all the grandchildren to the Big Island for a week of sun, sand, and memories. We have booked the resort, and we are covering it all. Flights, rooms, food. Just pack your bags and get the little ones ready. Dates are next month, the 12th through the 19th. We cannot wait to have the whole pack together. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. Responses were already flooding in from my brother, Matt, and my sister-in-law, Vanessa, and even my younger cousin, Sarah, who had 2 toddlers. Oh my God, Mom. This is amazing. Matt wrote, Thank you. Diane, the girls are going to flip, Vanessa added. I stood frozen in my kitchen for a long time. My relationship with my parents had been a series of cold wars and uneasy truces, a landscape of emotional landmines that I navigated with exhausted caution. There had been months where we spoke only about the weather, and holidays where the tension was so thick it felt like a physical weight on my chest. But lately, things had been quiet, peaceful. Even, we had gone to Sunday dinner 2 weeks ago, and my father, Gerald, had actually asked me about my work without grimacing. My mother had complimented my hair. I let out a breath I did not realize I'd been holding. Maybe this was it. Maybe the ice was finally thawing. A trip like this, an all-expenses-paid gesture of unity, felt like an olive branch the size of a tree. It was the kind of thing normal, happy families did. Mom, this is incredible, I typed, my thumbs moving quickly before I could overthink it. Thank you so much. Sophie is going to lose her mind. I hit send. I watched my blue bubble join the stream of gray ones. Moments later, the back door slid open, and my daughter, Sophie, burst in from the backyard. She was 8 years old, a whirlwind of scraped knees and tangled brown hair, holding a handful of dandelions she had rescued from the lawnmower. Mom, look, she shouted. I made a bouquet for the table. I looked at her, at the dirt smudged on her cheek, and the bright, unguarded joy in her eyes, and I felt a surge of warmth so intense it almost hurt. Sophie, I said, crouching down to her level. Guess what Grandma and Grandpa just texted me? She stopped, sensing the energy in my voice. What? They are taking all the cousins to Hawaii, and we are going too. Sophie's eyes went wide. She dropped the dandelions on the floor. Hawaii? Like where Moana lives? Exactly like where Moana lives, I said, laughing as she launched herself into my arms. We spent the next 2 hours in a state of manic delight. The gloom of the Tuesday afternoon vanished. Sophie dragged her construction paper bin onto the kitchen table and declared she needed to practice making leis. She cut strips of pink and orange paper, taping them together into loops, humming a song she had made up on the spot about coconuts and lava. I sat with her, drinking a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching her hands move. I allowed myself to believe it. I let the cynicism that usually guarded my heart dissolve. I thought about Sophie playing in the sand with Matt's kids, building castles while my parents sat under an umbrella, finally acting like the grandparents they claimed to be on Facebook. I thought about how much Sophie needed this. She often asked why she didn't see her cousins as much as they saw each other. I usually made up excuses about busy schedules or distance, even though we all lived within 40 minutes of one another. This trip would fix that. It would bridge the gap. Around 4 o'clock. After Sophie had run upstairs to find her swimsuit, even though the trip was weeks away, I decided to call my mother. I needed to confirm the flight details so I could clear my schedule. I dialed Diane's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and breathless. "Hello? Leah, isn't it exciting? I am just looking at swim trunks for your father. He thinks he can still pull off a Speedo. God help us." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Please tell him to stick to board shorts. Mom, for everyone's sake, I will try," she said. "But you know your father. Once he gets an idea in his head, it sticks." I paused, leaning my hip against the counter. "Mom, really, thank you. Sophie is upstairs packing her goggles right now. She is over the moon. I just wanted to double-check the dates so I can put in the time-off request. You said the 12th? There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was not a dropped call silence. It was a heavy, deliberate pause. The background noise of my mother's house, the television, the hum of her dishwasher, seemed to fade away, leaving only the static of the connection. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. The brightness was gone, replaced by a careful, measured cadence I recognized from my childhood. It was the voice she used when she was explaining why I could not have a toy I wanted, or why I was grounded for a tone of voice she didn't appreciate. "Sweetie," she said. My stomach dropped. That single word, drawn out and sickly sweet, was a warning shot. "What?" I asked. She sighed, a sound that implied I was already making this difficult. "I did not want to put this in the group text because I did not want to embarrass you, but we need to be realistic about the logistics." "Logistics?" I repeated. "You said you were covering it. If it is about the flight, Eric and I can pay for our own tickets. That is not a problem." "No, Leah," she said, "it is not about the money. Well, the budget is tight. Of course, Hawaii is not cheap, and we are paying for 5 other grandchildren." 5? I did the math in my head instantly. Matt had 3 kids. My sister-in-law Vanessa, who was married to my other brother Dave before he passed away, had 2. That was 5. Sophie was the 6th. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Mom, what are you saying?" She cleared her throat. "This trip is for the kids who have been present. Leah, it is a reward for the grandkids who have been around." The words hung in the air, suspended in the silence of my kitchen. Reward, present, around. I looked at the paper chain Sophie had left on the table. It was crooked and taped together with too much Scotch tape. "Are you saying Sophie is not invited?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best effort to keep it steady. Diane made a noise of exasperation. "Do not be dramatic, Leah. It is not personal. We just thought it would be better to keep the group cohesive. The other cousins know each other so well. They spend every weekend together at the club. Sophie is a bit of an outsider, isn't she? We didn't want her to feel left out when the others were reminiscing about things she wasn't part of." "You are ensuring she is left out," I said, my voice rising. "You are taking every single grandchild to Hawaii except her. How is that protecting her feelings?" "Leah, lower your voice," she snapped. "This is exactly why we made this decision. You get so emotional. I am emotional because you are excluding my 8-year-old daughter from a family vacation you just announced to the entire group chat." I said, "You let her believe she was going." I told her, "Mom, she is upstairs packing." "Well, that was premature of you," she said coldly. "You should have checked with me privately before getting her hopes up. You sent a text that said, 'Grandkids Hawaii Adventure.'" I shouted. How else was I supposed to interpret that? It is for the grandkids who are invested in this family, she said, and her voice was steel now. We can't just hand out rewards to everyone regardless of their contribution. Maybe Sophie can go next year, if things change, if we see a little more effort to be part of the family culture. Family culture? I felt like I had been slapped. We visited, we sent cards, we showed up for holidays, but I knew what she meant. Family culture meant total submission. It meant letting Diane critique my parenting without pushback. It meant Gerald never being questioned. It meant attending every single impromptu barbecue and Sunday dinner, regardless of work or illness, and smiling while they made passive-aggressive comments about my career or my husband's income. "Mom," I said, dropping my voice to a whisper, "please, don't do this. I will pay for her. I will pay for all three of us. Just let her come. Do not make me tell her she is the only one not allowed to go. It is not about the money." "Leah," she repeated, but this time she sounded bored. "The booking is done. The rooms are set. We simply do not have the space, and frankly, with the budget being what it is, we really can't stretch it any further. We are already stretching to cover the others, but you said, I have to go," she cut in. "Your father is calling me. We can talk about this later. Just tell Sophie there was a mix-up with the dates. She is young. She won't remember." The line went dead. I stood there, holding the phone against my ear, listening to the silence. The kitchen was quiet. Upstairs, I could hear the faint sound of drawers opening and closing. Sophie was packing. I lowered the phone and placed it on the counter. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I felt cold. A deep, bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The front door opened, and my husband, Eric, walked in. He looked tired, his tie loosened, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He saw my face immediately. "Leah?" he asked, dropping his bag. "What happened? Is everyone okay?" I looked at him, and for a second, I couldn't speak. I felt like if I opened my mouth, I would scream and never stop. "My parents are taking the grandkids to Hawaii," I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow. He blinked. Confused. "Okay, that sounds good. Why do you look like someone died?" "They are taking Matt's kids," I said, "and Vanessa's kids. And not Sophie." Eric frowned, tilting his head. "What do you mean? Like, the dates didn't work?" "No. Eric, I mean she is not invited. Mom told me it is a reward for the grandkids who have been around." Eric stared at me. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That is ridiculous. You must have misunderstood her. Diane can be vague, but she wouldn't do that. That is insane. She said it. Eric, she said Sophie is an outsider. She said maybe next year if we show more effort." Eric rubbed his face with his hand. He walked over to the refrigerator and opened it, staring inside as if the answer might be behind the milk carton. "Look, Leah, you know how your mom gets. She probably just booked a block of rooms and miscounted. And now she is embarrassed, so she is making up some defensive excuse about rewards. She does not mean it." He turned back to me, his expression reasonable. "Calm, the peacemaker. Call her back in an hour," he suggested. "Or better yet, I will call Gerald. It is just a misunderstanding. We will offer to book our own room, pay for our own flights, and just tag along. They aren't going to say no to that. They probably just didn't want to ask us to pay because they promised to cover everyone else." I looked at my husband. I loved him. He was a good man, a kind man, but he had grown up in a family where people said what they meant and loved each other without conditions. He had been watching my family for 10 years, and he still tried to apply the logic of normal people to the behavior of emotional terrorists. He wanted to believe it was a mistake because the alternative was too cruel to accept. He wanted me to smile and fix it so we could all go back to pretending everything was fine. "It is not a misunderstanding." "Eric," I said quietly. "Leah, come on," he said, reaching out to touch my arm. "Do not spiral. We can fix this. Just give them a chance to walk it back." I pulled my arm away. "I'm going to see Matt." "Matt? Why?" Because he is in the group chat. He has the details. I want to see exactly what they sent him. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door before he could stop me. I needed proof. I needed to see it in black and white before I could even begin to figure out what to tell my daughter. I met Matt at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small round table in the corner, hunched over a latte. He looked uncomfortable. He was wearing his work polo, and he kept checking his watch. When I sat down, he didn't meet my eyes. "Hey, Leah," he said. "You knew." I said, "I didn't ask a question. I just stated it." Matt winced. He took a sip of his coffee. "I didn't know. I mean, not for sure. You responded to the text. Matt, you said, 'Oh my God, Mom, this is amazing.' You knew Sophie wasn't included?" He looked up then, his face flushing. "No, I swear. I saw the text. I saw all the grandkids, and I just reacted. I assumed everyone was on the chain. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I realized your number was there, but what?" He sighed, reaching into his messenger bag. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. "Mom sent this to me and Vanessa via email yesterday." Before the text, I unfolded the paper. It was a printed itinerary, colorful and professionally designed. It had the resort logo at the top, the Royal Kona Retreat, and a day-by-day breakdown of activities: dolphin swimming, luau night, snorkeling charter, and there, under the heading Confirmed Travelers, was a list: Gerald Foster, Diane Foster, Matthew Foster, Karen Foster, Liam Foster, Emma Foster, Noah Foster, Vanessa Foster, Ava Foster, Lucas Foster. 10 names. Sophie's name was nowhere. I stared at the list. It wasn't just an omission. It was a roster. It was a defined circle, and my daughter was on the outside of it. Matt was watching me, looking miserable. I called her. "Leah." After I realized, I asked her, "What about Sophie?" "And?" I asked, not looking up from the paper. She told me, "Look, she said you guys had drifted away. She said she didn't want to force family bonding on people who didn't want it. She made it sound like maybe you had declined, or that you guys were fighting." I looked at him. Do I look like I declined? I was making paper leaves with Sophie when the text came through. Matt rubbed the back of his neck. "I know. It sucks. It really sucks. But what? But she has already paid the deposit. Leah, it is non-refundable. She showed me the receipt. It is thousands of dollars. If I make a scene, she might pull the plug on the whole thing. And the kids? Liam and Emma have been watching YouTube videos of the resort all morning." I looked at my brother. I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for my feelings, but fear of losing the prize. He was being bought. It was that simple. The trip was the carrot, and silence was the cost. "So you are just going to go?" I asked. "You are going to take your kids to Hawaii and let Sophie sit at home?" Matt looked down at his coffee cup. "It is not up to me. Leah, it is Mom and Dad's money. What am I supposed to do? Punish my kids because Mom is being a bitch to you? That isn't fair to them either." I stood up. I felt sick. The smell of roasted coffee beans, usually comforting, turned my stomach. "Can I keep this?" I asked, holding up the itinerary. Matt hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Just don't tell her I gave it to you. Please, she made me promise not to share the details yet." I didn't answer him. I walked out of the coffee shop, the paper clutched in my hand like a weapon. I sat in my car in the parking lot and texted my father. Gerald was the quiet one, the one who usually smoothed things over, the one who claimed he just wanted peace. "Dad." I wrote, "Mom says Sophie isn't invited to Hawaii. Please tell me this isn't true." I watched the screen. 1 minute passed, then 2. The 3 little dots appeared. "Let's not make this a thing." The text read, that was it. No apology, no explanation, no, "I'll talk to her. Let's not make this a thing." The dismissal hit harder than the exclusion. It was an erasure of my pain. It was a command. Suffering in silence is your duty. Inconveniencing us is your crime. My phone buzzed again. It was my cousin Jen. She lived 3 states away and wasn't part of the immediate circle, but she followed everyone on social media. Sent an image. I opened the message. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post my mother had made 20 minutes ago. It was a collage of photos. One of Matt's kids playing soccer. One of Vanessa's kids at a dance recital. A picture of the resort in Hawaii. The caption read, "So blessed to be taking all my grandbabies to paradise. Family is everything. Foster family tradition Hawaii bound. All of them, all of them." She was lying to the world while she cut my daughter out. She was curating a public image of the doting, generous matriarch, knowing that if I commented and corrected her, I would look like the bitter, ungrateful daughter starting drama on a happy post. It was a trap, a perfect, public trap. I drove home in a fog. When I walked into the house was quiet. Eric was in his office with the door closed, probably on a conference call. I walked into the kitchen. The paper lei was still on the table. Sophie ran in from the living room. "Mom, did you talk to Grandma? When do we leave? I found my goggles." I looked at her. Her face was so open, so trusting. She didn't know that people could be cruel just to prove a point. She didn't know that love could be conditional. I knelt down in front of her. I took her small hands in mine. "Soph," I said. I had to swallow hard to keep my voice from cracking. "Yeah?" "There has been a mix-up." Her face fell slightly. "A mix-up?" "Yeah, Grandma and Grandpa. They made a mistake with the booking. The hotel is totally full. They don't have a room for us." Sophie frowned. "Can't we sleep in their room? I can sleep on the floor. I like sleeping on the floor." I shook my head, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. "No, baby, it is a rule at the hotel. They are very strict. So, we aren't going?" I pulled her into a hug so she wouldn't see my face. "Not this time. Honey, we are going to figure something else out. Okay? Just you and me and Daddy. We will do something really fun. I promise." She went rigid in my arms for a second. Then she slumped. "Oh, okay." She pulled away. She didn't cry. That was almost worse. She just looked defeated, like she was used to being the one who didn't fit. "Can I go watch TV?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, baby. Go ahead." She walked out of the kitchen, leaving the paper lei on the table. I walked into the pantry. I closed the door behind me. I sat down on the floor, between the bins of potatoes and the recycling, and I buried my face in my knees. I cried until my chest ached. I cried for Sophie, for the rejection she didn't fully understand yet, but would feel in her bones. I cried for the little girl inside me who had spent 33 years trying to be good enough to be included, only to realize the finish line was always moving. I stayed there until the sky outside turned dark. Late that night, after Sophie was asleep, and Eric and I had eaten a silent dinner, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I rolled over and picked it up. It was a private message from Vanessa, my sister-in-law. "Leah," it read, "I am so sorry. I wanted to call, but I was afraid Diane might be there. She is stopping by later. Please, listen to me. Do not confront them yet. Do not blow this up on Facebook." I frowned, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Why?" I started to type, but another message popped up before I could send it. "There is more to it than you think. It isn't just a trip. Please just wait until we can talk." I stared at the glowing screen in the dark room. More to it than you think. I set the phone down, the dread in my stomach turning into something else, something colder, something sharper. They weren't just going on vacation. They were up to something, and whatever it was, it required my absence. The cafe Vanessa chose was 3 towns over, a place with dim lighting and high-backed booths that offered the kind of privacy usually reserved for illicit affairs or corporate espionage. I arrived 5 minutes early, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached, trying to shake the image of Sophie's face when I told her she wasn't going to Hawaii. The lie I had told her, that it was a booking error, tasted like ash in my mouth. Vanessa was already there. She was sitting in the furthest booth, staring into a mug of herbal tea as if it held the secrets to the universe. When I slid into the seat across from her, she jumped, splashing a little hot water onto the Formica table. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low. "Hey," she whispered. She looked terrible. Vanessa was usually the picture of put-together suburban motherhood. Blow-dried hair, yoga-toned arms, a smile that seemed permanently affixed for Instagram. Today, she wore no makeup, and there were dark, purple crescents under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. "I know this is awkward. Awkward is not the word." "Leah," she said, grabbing a napkin to dab at the spilled tea. Her hands were shaking, not a subtle tremor, but a violent, noticeable shake. I watched her hands. "Vanessa, what is going on?" I asked. "You sent me that message. You said there is more to it." She looked around the cafe, scanning the few other patrons, a college student with a laptop, an elderly couple sharing a scone, before leaning in close. "Diane called me this morning. She said she wanted to make sure I hadn't spoken to you. She asked me to help keep things calm until after the trip. She used those exact words. Keep things calm." "Calm?" I repeated, feeling a spike of irritation. She excludes my daughter from a family vacation and wants me to be calm? It is not just about the vacation. "Leah," Vanessa hissed. She lowered her voice even further. "Your dad. Gerald is terrified." "My father? Terrified of what?" Vanessa shook her head. "I don't know the specifics, but I overheard them talking in the kitchen last Sunday when I was helping clear the table. Gerald was saying something about exposure and keeping the narrative tight. He looked sick. Leah, gray, and Diane just kept shushing him, telling him that this trip would fix the optics." "Fix the optics?" I asked. "What optics? We are a boring suburban family. We don't have optics." Vanessa looked at me with pity. "You don't have optics," she said. "They do, or they think they do." She took a sip of her tea, her cup rattling against the saucer as she set it down. Then she dropped the bomb. "Leah, this isn't a one-time trip." "What do you mean?" "Diane has been telling the kids, my kids, Matt's kids, that this is the inaugural foster family tradition. She told them they are going to go to a different resort every year. Hawaii this year, maybe Europe next year. She is building a legacy thing." I felt the blood drain from my face. A tradition. If it was a one-time exclusion, a budget issue, I could perhaps wrap my head around it. But a tradition? She was setting up an annual event, a cornerstone of their childhood memories, specifically designed to exclude Sophie. She was creating a future where Sophie would watch her cousins pack their bags every summer, year after year. While she stayed home, it was a systematic excision. "She is writing you out." "Leah," Vanessa said softly. "She is creating a core group, and you and Sophie are not in it. She is buying their loyalty with these trips." "Loyalty?" I asked. "They are children. They are naturally loyal." "Not to her," Vanessa said. "You know how she is. She is demanding. She is critical. But if she is the gateway to Hawaii, to Disney World, to whatever comes next, the kids will learn to tolerate her. They will learn to perform for her." I sat back against the vinyl booth, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. It was so calculated. It was so Diane. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You are going. Your kids are on the list." Vanessa looked down at her hands. "Because I feel like a hostage." "Leah, I can't say no. If I say no, she cuts us off. You know Dave didn't leave us with much life insurance. I rely on their help for the boys' tuition. If I stand up for you, my kids lose out. But watching what she is doing to Sophie, it makes me sick." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin was cold. "Just be careful," she said. "Whatever reason they are giving you, the reward thing, is a cover. There is something else driving this. Gerald is scared of something coming to light, and Diane is trying to bury it under expensive sand." I left the cafe with more questions than answers. But the fog of confusion had been replaced by a sharp, crystalline anger. I drove straight to my brother Matt's house. I didn't call first. Matt lived in a development that was slightly nicer than ours, a sprawling neighborhood of two-story colonials with manicured lawns. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw his garage door was open. I walked up the driveway. I could hear music coming from inside the garage. Ukulele music. I stopped at the edge of the concrete. Inside, my nieces and nephews were gathered around a laptop set up on a workbench. Liam, Emma, and Noah were watching a YouTube tutorial on hula dancing. They were laughing, their movements clumsy and joyful, swaying their hips and waving their arms. "Look, Dad, look," Emma shouted. "I am doing the ocean hands." Matt was standing by the door to the house, holding a beer, watching them with a tight, strained smile. I watched for a moment, unseen. The scene was aggressively wholesome. It was the picture of a happy family preparing for the trip of a lifetime, and it broke my heart, because I knew my daughter should have been there, swaying her hips and laughing with them. I stepped into the garage. "Hey, Matt." He jumped, nearly dropping his beer. He spun around, his eyes widening when he saw me. "Leah," he said, hey, I didn't know you were coming over." I looked past him at the kids. They were too absorbed in the video to notice me yet. "Practicing?" I asked. Matt rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, just, getting them excited. They look excited," I said. Matt stepped out of the garage, gesturing for me to follow him onto the driveway. Away from the kids. He didn't want them to hear. He knew. "Look, Leah," he said, keeping his voice low. "I know you are upset. I get it. But coming here and making me feel guilty isn't going to change Mom's mind. I am not here to make you feel guilty." "Matt," I said, crossing my arms, "I am here because I need the truth. Vanessa told me some things." Matt's face paled. "What did Vanessa say?" "She said this is an annual thing now, a tradition. She said Mom is buying your loyalty." Matt let out a scoff. But it sounded forced. "That is Vanessa being dramatic. Mom just wants to do something nice for the grandkids. And she said you took money." I said, "I threw it out there. A bluff based on a hunch. Based on the way he wouldn't meet my eyes." Matt froze. The defensive posture dropped, replaced by a slump of defeat. He looked at his shoes. I waited. It wasn't a bribe. "Leah," he said quietly. "What was it then?" I asked. He sighed. A long, ragged sound. "I am 3 months behind on the mortgage. The variable rate adjusted. And it killed us. I was going to lose the house. I didn't tell anyone, not even you." I softened. Just a fraction. "Matt, I am sorry. I didn't know. I asked Dad for a loan." He continued. "But Mom intercepted. She said they could help. She said they could cover the arrears and give me a cushion, but what?" He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "She said she needed me to be on her team. She said she was tired of me indulging your drama. She said if I wanted the help, I had to support her decisions regarding the family schedule." "So you sold me out," I said. My voice was flat. "You sold Sophie out for a mortgage payment." "I saved my house," he hissed, his voice cracking. "I have 3 kids. Leah, what was I supposed to do? Let us get foreclosed on just to stand on principle? You know how she is. If I had argued about Sophie, she would have closed the checkbook." I looked at my brother. We had grown up in the same house, survived the same minefield of our parents' expectations. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream at him. But mostly, I just felt a profound, exhausting pity. He was 40 years old, and he was still a child begging for his allowance, dancing to her tune because he had never learned how to live without their safety net. "I am not indulging drama. Matt," I said, "I am trying to protect my daughter from being treated like a second-class citizen." "I know," he said. "I know. But please, don't blow this up for me. If she thinks I talk to you, I won't tell her." I said. I turned to walk back to my car. "But Matt?" "Yeah?" "Enjoy Hawaii. I hope it is worth it." I drove home feeling like I was covered in a thin film of grime. The corruption in my family wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet and transactional. It was checks written to silence dissent. When I got home, Eric was in the kitchen making pasta. He looked up, hopeful. "Did you talk to him?" I nodded. "He knew. He is taking the money." Eric slammed the wooden spoon down on the counter. "That is unbelievable. Your brother has no spine." "He has a mortgage," I said, sinking into a chair, "and Mom bought it." Eric turned off the burner. He walked over to me and put his hands on my shoulders. "Okay," he said. "Screw them. Seriously. Leah, screw them. We don't need their charity trip. We don't need their approval. I know." I said, "But Sophie?" "We will take her," Eric said firmly. "I have been looking at numbers. We have the savings we set aside for the roof replacement. Ideally, I wouldn't spend it. But this is an emergency of a different kind. We can afford 3 tickets to Hawaii. We can afford a hotel." I looked at him. "Really?" "Yes," he said. "We will fly out the same day. We will stay at a hotel nearby. We will show up on the beach." "What are they going to do? Call the police?" "It is a public beach. Sophie can play with her cousins, and your parents can sit there and stew. We won't let them gatekeep the family." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. It was petty, maybe, but it was also a reclamation of power. If we paid our own way, they couldn't control us. "Let's do it," I said. I grabbed my laptop. I remembered the itinerary Matt had given me, the Royal Kona retreat. I searched for the resort. It came up instantly. A sprawling complex of bungalows and pools. I clicked on reservations. I punched in the dates, the 12th through the 19th, 2 adults, 1 child. I hit search. The screen loaded for a second, then a message popped up in red text. "Sold out." I frowned. I tried different dates, shifting it by a day or 2. "Sold out. It is a small resort." I said, "A boutique place. They must have booked the whole thing." Eric leaned over my shoulder. "Try a travel site. Maybe they have blocked rooms." I spent the next 20 minutes scouring Expedia. Kayak, hotels, Calm. Nothing. The entire resort was locked down for that week. I sat back, frustrated. "We could stay somewhere else," I said. "There is a Marriott down the coast." "But the cousins are at the retreat," Eric pointed out. "If we are 10 miles away, Sophie won't see them. The whole point is for her to be with the kids." I gnawed on my thumbnail. I need to know if it is actually full or if they just blocked it for a private event. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the Royal Kona retreat. A cheerful voice answered. "Aloha, Royal Kona retreat. This is Kai. How may I assist you?" "Hi," I said, pitching my voice a little higher, trying to sound authoritative. "This is Diane Foster." I winced as I said it. Impersonating my mother felt dirty. "Mrs. Foster," Kai said. "So wonderful to hear from you. We are so looking forward to hosting your group next month." "Yes, wonderful," I said. "Listen, I have a slight change of plans. I might need to add 1 more room, a small one. Is there anything available?" I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Oh, I am sorry. Mrs. Foster, as per the contract, you have the exclusive buyout of the property for the week. The entire resort is yours." Exclusive buyout? My jaw dropped. That cost tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. My parents were comfortable, but they weren't buy out a resort wealthy. "Right," I stammered. "I just wanted to check if we had utilized every unit." "Yes, ma'am," Kai said. "All 12 bungalows are assigned to the trust." "The trust?" I asked. "Yes, the booking is under the Foster Family Trust entity. The payment cleared last week." I froze. The Foster Family Trust. I had heard that name before. Years ago, when my grandmother, my father's mother, passed away, there had been talk of a trust. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of college and struggling to find a job. I remembered asking my father if Grandma had left anything for the grandchildren. He had looked at me with a somber expression and said, "It is all tied up in a trust. Leah, it is very complicated. Honestly, you wouldn't want the responsibility. It is better if we handle it." I had believed him. I had believed that handling it meant paying taxes and managing properties. I didn't realize it meant hoarding an inheritance to use as a behavioral control mechanism. Thank you, Kai, I said, my voice faint. I hung up. What is it? Eric asked. They bought out the whole resort, I said, and they paid for it with the Foster Family Trust. Eric frowned. I didn't know your family had a trust. Neither did I. Really? I said, I knew it existed, but I thought it was just a legal shell for the house. I didn't know it had buy out a resort in Hawaii money. I stood up and started pacing the kitchen. This is why Matt folded. This is why Vanessa is scared. It isn't just Mom and Dad's retirement savings. It is a massive pot of money that they control, and they are using it to pull the strings. I need to see a lawyer, I said. Eric looked at the clock. It is 7 p.m. Tomorrow, I said. I'm going to see Kara. Kara Winslow was an old high school friend who had gone into estate law. She had a small office downtown, above a bakery. I sat in her leather chair the next morning, clutching a cup of lukewarm coffee, explaining the situation. Kara listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, when I finished explaining the trust and the exclusion. She tapped her pen against her chin. Okay, she said. So, here's the thing about family trusts. They are private instruments, unless you are a beneficiary. You have no right to see the document, but I am a grandchild. I said, my grandmother set it up. Shouldn't I be a beneficiary? Likely. Yes, Kara said, but trusts can be drafted with what we call incentive provisions. Incentive provisions? Kara nodded. It is a nice way of saying ruling from the grave, or, in your parents' case, ruling from the trustee's chair. A trust can stipulate that beneficiaries only receive distributions if they meet certain criteria. Graduating college, staying drug-free, earning a certain income, or, I asked, or subjective criteria, Kara said, like maintaining good standing in the family, or adhering to family values. It gives the trustees, your parents, absolute discretion to decide who gets paid and who doesn't. If the trust owns the vacation booking, they can legally decide who benefits from it. So they can just cut me out? I asked. Even if Grandma wanted the money to be for all of us? If the trust gives them that power? Yes, Kara said. And if they are using trust assets to pay for a vacation for some beneficiaries but not others, they are treading a fine line. It could be argued they are breaching their fiduciary duty to treat beneficiaries impartially, but you would need to see the trust instrument to prove it. How do I get it? You have to ask, Kara said, formally, in writing. I went home feeling heavy. A formal request would be a declaration of war. I sat down at my computer to check my email, looking for anything, an old tax document, a forwarded message from years ago, that might mention the trust. I searched Foster Trust in my inbox. Most of the results were irrelevant, but then I saw one. It was an email from my Aunt Linda, my father's sister. She was a scatterbrained woman who often hit reply all by mistake. The subject line was FWD, July schedule. It was dated 3 days ago. I opened it. It looked like Linda had meant to forward a recipe to me, but she had accidentally attached an entire thread she had been part of with my parents. I scrolled down past the recipe for zucchini bread. There, at the bottom, was a message from Diane to Gerald and Linda. Gerald, stop worrying about Leah. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. If she makes trouble about the trip, just remind her what she signed in 2019. She agreed to the terms. She gave us the authority. I stared at the screen. What she signed in 2019. 2019. That was 4 years ago. Sophie was 4. What was I doing in 2019? I closed my eyes, trying to access the memory. 2019 was a blur. I had been working 2 jobs. Eric had been traveling for work, and I had been struggling with a lingering, crushing postpartum depression that hadn't lifted since Sophie was born. I was exhausted all the time. I was barely functioning. I remembered my mother coming over a lot. Helping, I stood up and ran to the basement. We kept a plastic filing box of important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, old tax returns. I hauled the box onto the washing machine and popped the lid. I flipped through the hanging folders. Taxes 2020. Taxes 2019. Medical. I found a folder labeled Family/MISC. I pulled it out. Inside was a stack of papers, a copy of my grandfather's obituary, a recipe for cranberry sauce, and at the back, a stapled document on thick, bonded paper. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The title was centered at the top in bold. Black letters, Foster Family Participation Agreement. I stared at it. I remembered the day I signed it. My mother had brought it over one afternoon when Sophie was sick with the flu and I hadn't slept in 48 hours. "It is just some paperwork for the estate planning. Sweetie," she had said, putting a pen in my hand, "just to make sure Sophie is covered for future educational costs. Dad needs it for the lawyers." I hadn't read it. I had trusted her. I had just wanted her to stop talking so I could go back to sleep. I turned the page. It wasn't about education. It was a contract. The undersigned agrees that eligibility for family-sponsored experiences, gifts, and trust distributions is contingent upon active and respectful participation in family events. Authorizes the trustees to make all travel and accommodation decisions for participating grandchildren. Failure to adhere to family codes of conduct may result in suspension of benefits. I felt bile rise in my throat. This wasn't just a trip. This was a trap that had been set 4 years ago, while I was vulnerable, exhausted, and trusting. They had codified their control. They had made me sign a warrant for my own exclusion. I looked at the date next to my signature. It was scrawled, messy, the handwriting of a woman who was barely holding it together. I had signed it, and now they were using it to break my daughter's heart. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the basement, the washing machine humming a rhythmic, indifferent thrum beside me. The document in my hands felt heavy, not with the weight of the paper, which was expensive and thick, but with the density of the betrayal it contained. Foster Family Participation Agreement. I read it again, my eyes tracing the lines of text that had been drafted by a lawyer but dictated by my mother's insecurities. The language was deceptively warm. It spoke of family unity, shared values, and harmonious engagement. To an outsider, it might have looked like a mission statement for a wealthy, philanthropic clan, but I knew the code. I knew the dialect of the Foster household. Clause 4 stood out like a fresh bruise. Eligibility for family-sponsored experiences, including but not limited to vacations, retreats, and educational grants, is contingent upon active and respectful participation in all designated family events. This includes, but is not limited to, attendance at major holidays, responsiveness to family communications, and conduct that upholds the reputation and cohesion of the family unit. Conduct that upholds the cohesion of the family unit. I lowered the paper. The basement smelled of detergent and damp earth. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. This wasn't a legal document. It was a report card for emotional compliance. Suddenly, the last 10 years of my life rearranged themselves in my mind. I had always thought my parents were just difficult, or forgetful, or perhaps getting older and more rigid, but looking at this paper, I realized I had been living inside a Skinner box. I flashed back to my 30th birthday. I had planned a small dinner at a restaurant downtown. I had invited my parents 3 weeks in advance. 2 days before the dinner, I had gotten into a minor argument with my father about politics. Nothing screaming, just a difference of opinion at the Sunday table. I had stood my ground, on my birthday. They didn't show up. They didn't call. When I finally called them, worried sick, my mother had answered with a breezy, distracted tone. "Oh, is that tonight? We are so tired. Leah, we just didn't feel up to the drive." I had cried myself to sleep that night, feeling selfish for demanding their time. But it hadn't been fatigue. It had been a sanction. I had failed the respectful communication clause, so I had been denied the family experience of a birthday dinner. It was everywhere. The year Eric and I spent Christmas with his parents instead of mine. That was the year my father stopped speaking to me for 6 weeks. claiming he was just busy with work. When I finally apologized for abandoning them, a check for $1,000 arrived in the mail the next week with a note. For the baby's nursery. It wasn't generosity. It was payment for services rendered. It was training. I stood up, my knees cracking. I grabbed the document and marched upstairs. I didn't care that it was 8 o'clock at night. I didn't care that I was wearing sweatpants. I needed to look her in the eye. I drove to my parents' house in a fugue state. Their house was a sprawling brick colonial on a hill, the kind of house that looked like it belonged on a postcard for the American dream. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows glowed with warm, golden light. I let myself in with my key. They were in the living room. The television was on, playing a rerun of a sitcom where everyone loved each other. Diane looked up from her needlepoint. Gerald was reading a biography of a president. "Leah?" my mother said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Is everything all right? You look frantic." I didn't say hello. I walked over to the coffee table and slapped the document down on top of her Southern Living magazine. "What is this?" I asked. Diane looked at the paper. She didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty. She just looked annoyed, as if I had tracked mud onto her white carpet. "It is paperwork." "Leah," she said, smoothing the fabric on her lap. "You signed it years ago. Why are you digging through old files?" "I signed it when I was sleep-deprived and vulnerable," I said, my voice shaking. "You told me it was for Sophie's education. You didn't tell me it was a contract that let you decide whether or not my daughter gets to be part of this family based on how much I suck up to you." "Leah, really?" She sighed, picking up her needle. "You are being hysterical. It is standard estate planning. We have a lot of assets to manage. We need to ensure that the beneficiaries share our values." "Values?" I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. Is excluding an 8-year-old from a vacation a value? Is punishing a child because you don't like her mother's tone a value? Diane set her needlepoint down. She looked at me, her blue eyes hard and cold as marbles. "It is not about your tone. Leah, it is about your commitment. You are constantly pulling away. You miss Sunday dinners. You prioritize Eric's family. You challenge your father on everything. We cannot reward behavior that undermines the family." The words hung in the air. Undermines the family. There it was. The truth. My boundaries were not seen as healthy distance. They were seen as treason. Every time I said no, every time I protected my time or my mental health, they viewed it as an act of war against the cohesion of the unit, and Sophie was the collateral damage. "So that is it," I said, feeling a strange, icy calm settle over me. "Sophie is not going to Hawaii because I don't visit enough? That is the transaction? Sophie is not going because the trip is for the core group," Diane said, picking up her needle again. "And frankly, Leah, you have made it very clear over the last few years that you do not consider yourself part of the core. You want to live your own life? Fine, but you do not get to enjoy the benefits of a system you refuse to support." I looked at my father. He hadn't turned a page of his book in 5 minutes. "Dad?" I said, "Do you agree with this?" Gerald looked up. He looked old, older than he had last week. His skin was papery, and there was a tremor in his hand holding the book. "Leah," he said, his voice rough, "your mother is right about the unity. We just want everyone to be together, to be on the same page. By hurting Sophie?" I asked. Gerald closed his book. He looked at Diane, then back to me. His eyes were pleading. "Please, Leah, let's not do this tonight." I turned back to my mother. "You are a monster," I said quietly. Diane gasped. She put a hand to her chest. "Gerald, are you going to let her speak to me like that in our own house?" I turned and walked out before he could answer. I knew he wouldn't defend me. He never had. The next morning, I received a text from my father. "Meet me at the park by the river. Noon. Alone." I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching ducks fight over a piece of bread. When Gerald's car pulled up, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he had seen the cruelty of it. Maybe he was coming to apologize, to tell me he had overruled her and Sophie was coming. He walked toward me slowly, wearing his beige windbreaker. He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving 2 feet of empty space between us. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Hi, honey," he said. He stared out at the river. I waited. "Your mother is very upset," he said finally. "She didn't sleep at all last night." I felt the hope die. I didn't sleep either. "Dad, I had to explain to Sophie again why she isn't good enough to go on the trip with her cousins." Gerald winced. He took a handkerchief out of his pocket and wiped his forehead. "Leah, you have to understand. Your mother carries a lot of anxiety. She wants this trip to be perfect. She has this vision in her head, a vision that doesn't include me." I said, "It is not that." He said, "It is just, when you are there is tension. You ask questions. You have that look on your face like you are judging us. It makes her nervous. She just wants a week where everyone is happy and agreeing with her. So I am being banned for having a face?" I asked. He sighed. "Please. Don't stress her out before the trip. Her blood pressure is already up. If you keep pushing this, she is going to get sick. Do you want that on your conscience?" I stared at him. It was the ultimate trump card. The health defense. My mother had been using her fragile health to control us for decades. If we argued, she got a migraine. If we left early, she had palpitations. "Dad," I said, changing the subject, "the resort told me the trip is paid for by the Foster Family Trust." Gerald stiffened. "Who told you that?" "The reservation desk. I called them." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't be calling them. Leah, it is a private booking. Why is Sophie excluded from the trust benefits?" I asked. "Grandma set that up for all of us. It is complicated." Gerald said. He said it like a door slamming shut. "Explain it to me." I said, "I can't." He said, "The trust. The structure has changed over the years. It is not just about Grandma anymore. It is about asset protection. It is about the future." "What does that mean?" "It means you need to drop it. Leah, please, for everyone's sake, just let it go. We will send Sophie a nice gift from the island." I stood up. "A gift? You think a souvenir t-shirt is going to fix this?" "I am doing the best I can," Gerald snapped. His sudden anger surprised me. He looked terrified. "I am trying to keep everything together. Leah, you have no idea what it takes to keep this family afloat." He looked at me with a desperate, wild intensity. "Just let us have the trip," he whispered. "Please." He got up and walked back to his car, leaving me alone on the bench. "You have no idea what it takes to keep this family afloat." The phrase stuck in my mind. Afloat. It implied drowning. I drove home and went straight to my laptop. I needed someone who understood money. I needed someone who could look at a complicated situation and see the math underneath. I called Brooke. Brooke and I had been best friends since kindergarten. She was a forensic accountant now, the kind of person who found joy in spreadsheets and tax fraud. She lived in Chicago, but she picked up on the first ring. "Leah," she said, "to what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you are finally leaving the suburbs and moving to the city." "Not exactly." I said, "I need a favor, a professional favor. Name it. I need you to look up something for me. A trust. The Foster Family Trust. And maybe a company called Foster Holdings, LLC. Brooke's tone shifted instantly. She went from friend to shark. "Give me the spellings. What am I looking for?" "I don't know." I said, "My parents are acting strange. They are spending money like water, taking the whole family to Hawaii, buying out a resort, but they are excluding Sophie. My dad said keeping the family afloat is hard. It feels off. Give me an hour," Brooke said. I waited by the phone. I paced the living room. I cleaned the kitchen counters 3 times. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. "Okay," Brooke said. "I'm looking at public records. I can't see the trust document itself. That is private. But I can see property records and UCC filings. And? Leah, your parents don't just own their house. The deed was transferred to Foster Holdings, LLC about 5 years ago." Okay, I said. That is normal for liability, right? Sure, Brooke said. But here's the weird part. There is a lien notice filed against the property 3 months ago. A lien? I asked. Like, a debt? A tax lien, Brooke said. It looks like Foster Holdings missed a property tax payment. It was paid eventually, but the notice is there, and there is a UCC financing statement filed against the LLC's assets by a private lender, not a bank. Leah, a private equity group. High-interest stuff, usually. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Why would they go to a private lender? They have perfect credit. They have been with Chase Bank for 30 years. Maybe they are maxed out, Brooke said. Or maybe they needed cash fast and couldn't wait for a bank approval. She typed something else. I could hear the keys clacking. Leah, did you know they refinanced the house 18 months ago? No, I said. They paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. They had a mortgage burning party. I was there. Well, they took out a new one, Brooke said. A big one. Almost 80% of the value. And the timeline. It lines up with when you said they started buying all those lavish gifts. The new car for your brother? The renovation on the shore house? Yeah, I whispered. It looks like they are cashing out the equity, Brooke said. They are draining the house to fund this lifestyle. They are spending against a deadline. Leah, or they are trying to prove they are liquid when they are actually drowning. I thanked Brooke and hung up. My head was spinning. My parents weren't just mean. They were broke. Or they were pretending not to be. They were burning the furniture to keep the house warm. The Hawaii trip, the exclusivity, the reward. If they were bleeding money, why spend $50,000 on a vacation? Unless the vacation wasn't a vacation. Unless it was a show. That night, my phone rang again. It was Vanessa. She was whispering again. I could hear the sound of a bathroom fan in the background. She was hiding. Leah, she said, I am freaking out. What happened? I asked. I'm at your parents' house, she said. We came over for dinner. I just walked past the study. Diane is on the phone with Marla. Marla was my mother's best friend, a woman who thrived on gossip like a vampire thrived on blood. What did she say? She said, Vanessa paused, her voice trembling. She said, once we are in Hawaii, Leah can't ruin it. Everyone will see she is the problem. We will have the photos. We will have the memories. And she will be the one sitting at home pouting. It will be clear who the unstable one is. I gripped the phone. Unstable? She is planning to spin this. Leah, Vanessa said. She is terrified you are going to expose something. I don't know what. But she is setting it up so that if you do speak out, nobody will believe you. She is going to paint you as the jealous, estranged daughter who is trying to ruin a nice family moment. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. She wants to turn the family against me. I said, permanently. She is afraid. Leah, Vanessa said. She is acting like a cornered animal, and she is dragging us all down with her. I want to back out. I told Matt I want to cancel. What did Matt say? He said we can't. He said Dad told him the trust distributions for the Grandkids college funds are tied to this trip. If we don't go, the money stops. I closed my eyes. It was a hostage situation. I hung up with Vanessa and sat in the dark. I needed a plan. I couldn't just scream at them. Screaming was what they wanted. Screaming proved I was unstable. Screaming played right into Diane's narrative. I needed to be colder. I needed to be smarter. I needed to give them a choice, a clear binary choice that stripped away the complicated excuses and the emotional manipulation. I opened my laptop. I started drafting an email. Dear Mom and Dad, I am writing this to be clear, calm, and direct. I understand you have organized a trip for the family. I understand you have chosen to exclude Sophie. I am not asking for money. I am not asking for a handout. I am asking for my daughter to be treated with the same dignity as her cousins. If this exclusion stands, I want you to understand the consequences. It will not be a silent drifting apart. It will be a formal end to our participation in the Foster Family Trust and all associated family participation agreements. I will not sign any further waivers. I will not submit to any further review. You have 24 hours to add Sophie to the itinerary. If the resort is full, we will accept a different accommodation nearby, provided she is included in all activities. This is not a negotiation. This is a boundary. Leah, I read it over. It was strong. It was fair. I hovered my mouse over the send button. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Matt. Mom knows you are talking to people. She knows you called the resort. She is furious. I ignored it. I went back to the send button. Another text from Matt. Leah, stop. Seriously. Dad just told me. Mom says if you keep pushing, Dad will cancel the trust distributions. For everyone. I froze. Not just for you. For me. For Vanessa. For the kids. She is threatening to cut off the college funds for all 6 grandkids if you don't get in line. I stared at the message. She was holding my nieces and nephews hostage. If I fought for my daughter, Matt's kids would lose their college money. Vanessa's kids would lose their tuition support. She had strapped a bomb to the entire family and handed me the detonator. I realized then that this wasn't about feelings. It wasn't about family unity or respectful communication. It was about money. It was about control. And my mother was willing to burn the whole village to the ground just to make sure I bent the knee. I slowly deleted the email. I closed the laptop. I wasn't going to send a letter. A letter was too easy for them to ignore. I needed to find out what they were hiding. I needed to find out why they were refinancing the house and taking out high-interest loans while pretending to be kings of the world. If they were going to play dirty, I had to stop playing nice. I had to find the leverage that Gerald was so terrified of, and I had to do it before that plane took off. The morning light in Kara Winslow's office was harsh, cutting through the blinds in thin, dusty slats that illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat across from her, the foster family participation agreement lying on the mahogany desk between us like a dead animal we were both afraid to touch. Kara adjusted her glasses. Her brow furrowed as she read the document for the 3rd time. She had highlighted several passages in yellow, the neon ink screaming against the creamy, bonded paper. Okay, she said, leaning back in her chair. The leather creaked, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Here is the reality. Leah, this document? It is a scarecrow. A scarecrow? I asked, leaning forward. Kara nodded. It is designed to look terrifying. It is designed to make you think there are crows, or in this case, lawyers, waiting to peck your eyes out if you step out of line. But legally, it is flimsy. A contract requiring respectful communication in exchange for family love is almost impossible to enforce in a court of law. It is too vague. What defines respect? What defines a family event? It is subjective. I felt a small knot of tension loosen in my chest. So it is meaningless? Not meaningless, Kara corrected. She tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. It is psychological. It is a tool for compliance. Your mother knows she probably can't take you to court for missing Christmas dinner, but she also knows that if you believe she can cut you off, you will fall in line. It is a bullying tactic dressed up in legalese. She paused, and her expression darkened. But, Leah, there is something else. I felt the knot tighten again. What? I pulled the probate records from the county clerk after you left yesterday. Kara said. She opened a folder and slid a photocopy across the desk toward me. This was filed 3 months after your grandmother died. I looked at the document. It was titled, First Amendment to the Foster Family Trust. I scanned the dense legal text, my eyes swimming with words like grantor, beneficiary, and trustee. Look at Article 7, Kara said softly. I looked. The distribution of discretionary funds for family welfare, education, and recreation shall be determined by a family committee, consisting of the primary trustee and 1 designated appointee. Who is the primary trustee? I asked. Your father, Kara said. And the appointee? Kara pointed to a signature at the bottom of the page. It was my mother's signature, Diane Foster. Grandma didn't name the committee, Kara explained. This amendment was filed after she died. The original trust likely gave the power to a neutral party or had a set distribution schedule. But your parents, or likely your mother, petitioned to amend it. They consolidated the power. They made themselves the gatekeepers. I stared at the signature. It was loopy and large, taking up more space than necessary. It was a signature that demanded attention. So they hijacked it, I said. They took the money Grandma meant for all of us and put it behind a gate that only they can open, essentially, Kara said. And because the trust gives them absolute discretion to determine what constitutes family welfare, they can argue that excluding a disruptive family member is actually a protective measure for the rest of the group. I felt sick. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a coup. They had seized the family legacy and turned it into a slush fund for their own egos. I left Kara's office feeling like I was walking underwater. The air outside was humid and thick. I needed to talk to my father. I needed to understand how he could let this happen. He had been Grandma's son. She had adored him. She had trusted him. I found him in the garden of their house. He was on his knees, weeding the hydrangeas. He was wearing an old sun hat and stained gardening gloves. From a distance, he looked like a harmless, gentle old man. I opened the gate. The latch clicked. He looked up. When he saw me, his shoulders slumped. "Leah," he said, "I thought we agreed." "We didn't agree on anything." "Dad," I said. Walking over to him, I stood over him, my shadow falling across his work. "I just came from Kara Winslow's office." He flinched. He pulled a weed from the dirt with a sudden, violent jerk. I saw the amendment. "Dad, I know about the committee." He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the dirt. "You shouldn't be digging into things you don't understand." "I understand enough." I said, "I understand that you and Mom changed the rules after Grandma died so you could control the money. And I know about the audit. That stopped him." He froze. His hands, still clutching the weed, went perfectly still. "Who told you about the audit?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter." I said. "Brooke found the lien. She found the financing statement. I know you are in trouble. Dad, I know Foster Holdings is bleeding." Gerald slowly stood up. He peeled off his gardening gloves. His hands were shaking. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the mask slip. I saw the terror underneath the suburban placidity. "It is a mess." "Leah," he said, his voice cracking, "it is a goddamn mess. The real estate market turned. We made some bad leverages. The tax authority is asking questions about the LLC expenses. They are looking at everything, every dinner, every trip, every business expense. So why Hawaii?" I asked, bewildered. "If you are being audited, why spend $50,000 on a vacation?" "Because we have to look stable," he hissed. He looked toward the house, checking to make sure Diane wasn't watching from the window. "The auditors look for instability. They look for panic. Your mother. She thinks that if we keep doing the big family events, if we keep the tradition alive, it proves that the trust is functioning as intended. It proves the money is being used for family welfare, not just being siphoned off to pay debts. It was a Ponzi scheme of appearances. They were spending money they didn't have to prove they had money to spend." "Okay," I said. "I get the panic. I get the fear. But Dad, how does excluding Sophie help you? How does hurting your granddaughter protect you from an audit?" Gerald looked away. He rubbed his face with his hand, smearing a streak of dirt across his cheek. "Because you don't play along." "Leah." The words were quiet, but they hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "You ask questions," he said. "You have always asked questions. If you were there, you would notice the cheap resort rooms. You would ask why we are paying with a business card. You would make a face when your mother gave a speech about the legacy, and the auditors, if they interview the family." He trailed off. "They are afraid I would tell the truth." I realized. They are afraid I wouldn't lie for them. "So Sophie is the price," I said. "My daughter is the sacrifice you are making to keep your secret safe. Your mother thinks—" Gerald struggled with the words. "She thinks if you are rewarded, you will keep doing it. She thinks if we let you come, even after you have been difficult, It teaches you that you can undermine us and still get the prize. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't angry cruelty. It was bureaucratic cruelty. It was a policy decision. We cannot incentivize dissent. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Leah, please, just let this one go. Once the audit clears, once we refinance the commercial property, we can make it up to her. Next year. Next year. I looked at my father. I realized then that there would always be a next year. There would always be a reason to defer love until the conditions were right. I am not waiting for next year. Dad, I said, and neither is Sophie. I walked away. I didn't look back. When I got home, I found Eric sitting on the back porch, watching Sophie play on the swing set. She was swinging high, pumping her legs, her hair flying out behind her. She looked happy. She didn't know that her grandfather had just confirmed she was a liability to the family balance sheet. I sat down next to Eric. They are broke, I said, and they are scared. I told him everything, the audit, the amendment, the logic of the exclusion. Eric listened, his jaw working. When I finished, he stared at Sophie. We have to protect her, he said. We can't stop the trip. I said, they are leaving in 3 days. The narrative is set. Then we go somewhere else, Eric said. Just us. We take the money we were going to use to crash their trip, and we go somewhere Sophie will actually love. Not a resort where she has to perform for your mother. Somewhere for her? Legoland? I suggested. She has been talking about it for 2 years. Legoland. Eric agreed. We fly out the same day they do. We turn off our phones. We don't look at Instagram. We don't look at the family chat. We just give her a week where she's the center of the universe. It was a good plan. It was the healthy plan. But as we sat there, planning the flights and looking up hotel rooms near the park, I felt a heavy, crushing sense of defeat. I felt like I was retreating. I was letting them win. I was letting them take the rest of the family to paradise while I took my daughter to a theme park as a consolation prize. It felt like I was admitting that we didn't belong. The next afternoon, I went to the grocery store. We needed snacks for the plane. I was pushing my cart down the cereal aisle, staring at the boxes of Cheerios, when I heard a voice. Leah. Oh, honey, it is so good to see you. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Marla. Marla was my mother's best friend since college. She was a woman who wore too much floral perfume and treated gossip like a competitive sport. I turned around. Marla was beaming at me, wearing a tennis outfit that cost more than my car payment. Hi, Marla, I said, forcing a smile. She rushed forward and squeezed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I just wanted to say I am so happy for you, she gushed. Happy for me? I asked, confused. Yes, about getting back in Diane's good graces. I know it has been, well, rocky. But I'm so glad you guys are working it out. I stared at her. What are you talking about, Marla? Oh, you know, she said, waving a hand airily. The whole thing with Sophie. Diane told me how hard it has been for you, trying to navigate, well, Sophie's challenges. Sophie's challenges, I repeated. My voice was dangerously low. Sophie doesn't have challenges. She gets straight A's. She plays soccer. Marla's smile faltered for a second, then reattached itself. Oh, sure. But you know what I mean, the social stuff. Diane said you decided it was best to keep her home this time, to protect her. I felt the blood drain from my face. She said I decided? Marla blinked. Well, yes. She said you were worried Sophie wouldn't be able to handle the group dynamic, that you wanted to keep her in her routine. I think it is so brave of you. Leah, a lot of mothers would just force their kid into a situation they couldn't handle. But you are really putting her needs first. By keeping her away, the world tilted on its axis. Diane wasn't just excluding Sophie. She was rewriting reality. She was telling people, her friends, the community, that I was the one isolating my daughter. She was painting me as the over-anxious, neurotic mother who was keeping Sophie away because Sophie had issues. It was brilliant. It was evil. If I complained now, if I told people my mother excluded us, they would look at me with pity and think, "Oh, poor Leah. She is in denial." Diane told us she kept the girl home for her own good. She had inoculated the public against my truth before I had even opened my mouth. "No, Marla," I said, my voice shaking. "That is not what happened. Sophie is fine. Mom excluded her." Marla patted my arm again, her eyes filled with a condescending pity. "Oh, honey, of course. Whatever you need to tell yourself, we all just want what is best for the little ones." She squeezed my arm one last time and bustled away toward the dairy section, leaving me standing alone in the cereal aisle, surrounded by colorful boxes and a silence that screamed. I drove home with my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed proof. I needed to see the architecture of the lie. I burst into the house. Eric was at work. Sophie was at school. I texted Matt and Vanessa. "Send me the group chat history. Now. Everything. Even the stuff you think isn't important." Vanessa sent it within minutes. She sent a file export of the WhatsApp chain going back 6 months. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the file. I started reading. I saw the Grandkids adventure announcement. I saw the excitement. But then I started to see the gaps. Message deleted by admin. Message deleted by admin. There were dozens of them. Every time Matt or Vanessa had asked a question about logistics, every time someone had mentioned dates that conflicted, the message was deleted and replaced by a summary from Diane. Diane. "Just to clarify for everyone, the itinerary is set. No need to worry about the details. Let's focus on the fun." She was curating the history. She was scrubbing any evidence of confusion or dissent. Then I searched for my name. Diane, 3 months ago. "I just spoke to Leah. She is having one of her episodes. She is really stressed about Sophie's behavior at school. I think we need to give them some space this holiday." Diane, 2 months ago. "Leah is struggling with finances again. I offered to help, but you know how proud she is. She snapped at me. I am just going to pray for her." Diane, 3 weeks ago. "I asked Leah about the summer trip, but she said Sophie isn't ready for a big group trip yet. It breaks my heart, but we have to respect her parenting." I stared at the screen. It was a catalog of fiction. She had been planting these seeds for months. Episodes. Struggling. Sophie isn't ready. She had built a paper trail of my instability, so that when the exclusion happened, it looked like the logical conclusion to a sad story, not a malicious act of rejection. I scrolled back further. I wanted to see how far back this went. I searched through my own archived emails, cross-referencing with the dates in the chat log. I found an email chain from 7 years ago. I had been 26. I had just finished grad school and was staring down a mountain of student loans. From Diane Foster. Leah Foster. Date, May 12th, 2016, Leah. "Dad and I have been talking. We want to help you with those loans. We can pay them off entirely. It would be a fresh start. The only condition is that you move back home for a year. We miss you. We think you need some time to get your feet under you before you try to make it in the city. There is a nice job at the library in town. We could have dinner every night." I remembered that email. I remembered the temptation. To be debt-free, to be safe. But I also remembered the catch. Move back home. Dinner every night. It wasn't a gift. It was a purchase order for my autonomy. I had replied, "Mom, thank you, but I have a job in the city. I want to make it on my own." Her reply had been a single line. "Fine, if you want to struggle. That is your choice. But don't come crying to us when it gets hard." She had never forgiven me for that. She had never forgiven me for refusing to be bought. And now, the Hawaii trip. It was just the newest price tag. The currency had changed. It was no longer student loans. It was acceptance for my daughter. But the transaction was the same. Submit, and we will pay. My phone buzzed. It was Vanessa. "Did you get the file?" she asked. "I got it." I typed back. "It is insane. Vanessa, she is lying about everything." "I know," Vanessa replied. "Leah." There is something else. What, last week? When I told her I was worried about the cost of Dylan's tutoring, she told me not to worry. She said she would cover it. That is good. I typed, though I knew it wasn't. She said she would pay for the whole year. Vanessa wrote, If what? If I keep the kids close. If I discourage anyone from supporting Leah's drama. She specifically said, We need to present a united front to help Leah see reality. I stared at the phone. She bought you. I typed, She is paying for my son's education. Leah. Vanessa wrote back, I am a single mom. I don't have a choice. It is like we are all renting love from her, and the rent keeps going up. Renting love. That was it. That was the whole dynamic. My parents didn't have relationships. They had tenants. They had employees. Matt was an employee who needed a mortgage bailout. Vanessa was a tenant who needed tuition. And I was the squatter who refused to pay rent. I closed the laptop. I felt a cold resolve settle in my chest. They thought they had won. They thought that by controlling the narrative, by buying off the witnesses, by rewriting history, they had boxed me in. They thought I would fade away, the unstable daughter who kept her child from paradise. But they had made a mistake. They had assumed that because I was broke, I was powerless. They had assumed that because I refused to take their money. I had no leverage, but I had something they didn't have. I had the truth, and I knew exactly when to drop it. The send-off breakfast. I checked the group chat history again. There was a message from yesterday. Diane. Everyone meet at the Gilded Table at 8 a.m. on departure day. We will have a big family breakfast before we head to the airport. I have hired a photographer to capture the bon voyage moment. A photographer. Of course. She wanted proof. She wanted the perfect image of the united family to post on Facebook, to show the auditors, to show the world. She wanted a photo of everyone happy and smiling. She was going to get a photo. All right. I stood up. I walked to the filing cabinet. I pulled out the participation agreement. I printed the amendment from the file Kara had given me. I printed the email about the student loans. I printed the chat logs where she called me unstable. I put them all in a crisp, manila folder. I wasn't going to email them. I wasn't going to text them. I was going to deliver them in person. I wasn't going to ruin the trip. I was going to ruin the illusion. I spent the morning cleaning my house with the frantic energy of someone preparing for a crime scene investigation. I scrubbed the baseboards, wiped down the kitchen island 3 times, and arranged the throw pillows on the couch in a configuration that suggested casual, unbothered order. I wanted neutral ground. I wanted a space that felt like mine, where the air didn't smell like my mother's lavender perfume or my father's cigar smoke. I needed a fortress. Sophie was at the neighbor's house. Mrs. Gable, a retired schoolteacher who lived 3 doors down, had happily agreed to watch her for the afternoon. I told Sophie that Grandma and Grandpa were coming over for boring grown-up talk about taxes. I saw the relief in her eyes when she realized she wouldn't have to perform for them. She grabbed her iPad and ran out the door without looking back. Once she was gone, I set the dining room table. No food, no coffee, just 3 glasses of water and my manila folder. I placed the folder in front of my seat at the head of the table. I checked my watch. 1:55. They were always 5 minutes early. Sure enough, at 1:55, the heavy thrum of my father's luxury sedan vibrated through the front window. I watched through the blinds as they pulled into the driveway. Diane stepped out first. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan and slacks, her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde perfection. She carried a large, floral-patterned gift bag. She paused to inspect my front flower beds, frowning slightly at a patch of weeds I had missed, before composing her face into a bright, rehearsal-ready smile. Gerald got out of the driver's side. He moved slowly, his shoulders hunched, looking less like a patriarch and more like a man walking to the gallows. He trailed behind her, checking his phone, avoiding looking at the house. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Leah!" Diane exclaimed, stepping forward to embrace me. I stiffened, letting her arms drape over my shoulders for a brief, performative hug. She smelled of hairspray and expensive anxiety. "We are so glad you invited us over," she said, pulling back and beaming. "I brought something." She lifted the gift bag. "We can talk about that inside," I said, stepping aside. We walked into the dining room. I gestured to the 2 chairs I had set up. Diane sat down, arranging her purse and the gift bag on the table, pushing my folders slightly to the side to make room. Gerald sat next to her, keeping his coat on. "So," Diane said, clasping her hands, "before we get into whatever serious business you want to discuss, look at this." She reached into the bag and pulled out a photo album. It was leather-bound, embossed with the year. I finally organized the photos from Easter. She said, opening the book, "Look, here is the one of all the cousins hunting for eggs. Well, almost all of them." I looked down. It was a beautiful photo. The lighting was perfect. My nieces and nephews looked like models in a catalog. Sophie wasn't in it. We had been there that day. But Sophie had been inside using the bathroom when the candid shot was staged. "It is lovely." "Mom," I said, my voice flat. I closed the book and slid it back toward her. "But that is not why we are here." Diane's smile faltered, just for a second, before reattaching itself. "Of course," she said. "You sounded so serious on the phone. Is everything okay? Is Eric okay?" I sat down at the head of the table. I placed my hands on the folder. "I want to talk about Hawaii," I said. Diane sighed, a long, tragic exhalation. "Oh, Leah, are we still on this? I thought we had settled it. It is just a logistical issue." "It is not a logistical issue," I said. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first paper, the itinerary Matt had given me. "Here is the booking," I said. "You booked the entire Royal Kona retreat, 12 bungalows. You paid for it via the Foster Family Trust." I pulled out the second paper, the participation agreement from 2019. "Here is the contract you made me sign, which states that benefits are tied to family cohesion." I pulled out the third paper, a printout of her Facebook post. "Here is where you told the world you were taking all the grandkids." And finally, I pulled out the transcript of her text messages to Marla, the ones Vanessa had helped me reconstruct, where she established the narrative that I was the one keeping Sophie away. I laid them out in a row, like tarot cards predicting a disaster. "I know what you are doing," I said. "I know you excluded Sophie on purpose. I know you are using the trust as a weapon. And I know you are telling people that I am the villain in this story so that when the truth comes out, nobody will believe me." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Diane stared at the papers. She didn't look at them. She looked through them. Then, her face crumbled. Her lower lip trembled, and her eyes filled with sudden, glistening tears. "I don't understand why you are doing this to me," she whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I try so hard. Leah, I try so hard to bring this family together. I spend hours planning these things. I lose sleep worrying about everyone's happiness. And you just attack me. You treat me like I am some kind of enemy." I watched her. I had seen this performance 1,000 times. It was the victim phase. "I am not attacking you. Mom, I am stating facts." "Facts?" she cried, grabbing a tissue from her purse. "You are twisting everything. You are taking a nice gesture, a vacation for the family, and turning it into a conspiracy. You always do this. You have always been so dramatic. Even when you were a teenager, you had to make everything about you." This was phase 2, the attack. "I am not making it about me," I said calmly. "I am making it about your 8-year-old granddaughter who is crying herself to sleep because she thinks her grandparents don't love her." Diane stiffened. The tears vanished instantly. Her eyes went dry and hard. "We love Sophie," she said coldly. This was phase 3, icy logic. "But we cannot reward behavior that undermines the family. You have made it very clear that you do not respect us. Leah, you do not come to Sunday dinners. You do not support your father. You let your husband make snide comments about our politics. If we include you in the reward, what message does that send to Matt and Vanessa? It tells them that loyalty doesn't matter. It tells them that the rules don't apply to Leah. So Sophie is collateral damage? I asked. She pays the price for my disrespect? She is your child, Diane said. She is an extension of you. If you want her to be included, you need to act like part of this family. I looked at Gerald. He was staring at his hands, his face pale. Dad, I said, is this what you think? That Sophie deserves to be left behind because I missed a few Sunday dinners? Gerald didn't look up. He cleared his throat. It isn't just about the dinners. Leah. Then what is it? I asked. Tell me. Gerald looked at Diane. She gave him a sharp, warning look, but he ignored it. He looked tired. He looked like a man who was carrying a weight that was slowly crushing his spine. The deposit, he said quietly. What? The deposit for the resort, he said. It is non-refundable. I frowned. So? You are rich. You lose deposits all the time. No, Gerald said. You don't understand. We paid for it through the trust. Specifically, through the charitable family bonding and education line item. He paused, licking his dry lips. The trust is under audit. Leah, I told you that. But what I didn't tell you is that we are being scrutinized for misclassification of funds. He took a breath. If we cancel the booking, or if we change the participant list to include people who aren't vetted, it triggers a review. The charitable designation requires that the beneficiaries be in good standing and that the event be a structured retreat. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to understand the bureaucratic nightmare he had built. If we change the booking now, the refund goes back to the trust, and it gets flagged. The auditors will see that we booked a $50,000 vacation and then canceled it. They will ask why. They will look at the eligibility requirements. So you are saying, I said slowly, trying to wrap my mind around the insanity of it, that you can't add Sophie because the paperwork you filed to write this trip off as a tax deduction doesn't allow for changes? It is not just a deduction, Diane snapped. It is a legal structure. We have to follow the rules. Rules you made up, I shouted, losing my cool for the first time. You wrote the rules. You wrote the amendment that said you get to decide who is in good standing. And we decided, Diane shouted back. We decided that you are not. I sat back, stunned. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about protection. The trip was a shield. They needed the event to happen perfectly, with the exact number of people, with the exact compliant family members, to prove to the auditors that the Foster Family Trust was a legitimate entity and not just a piggy bank for their lifestyle, including Sophie, an outsider, someone whose mother might ask questions or refuse to sign the educational retreat waivers, was a risk. It was a variable they couldn't control, so they cut her out. You calculated this? I said, looking at my mother. You knew I wouldn't fight. You thought I was too weak, or too poor, or too tired to make a scene. You thought I would just swallow it so I wouldn't ruin your audit trail. Diane smoothed her cardigan. She looked composed again. I thought you would be reasonable, she said. I thought you would understand that sometimes. We have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the estate. The greater good of the estate. She talked about our family like it was a corporation. Okay, I said. I took a deep breath. I pushed the anger down. I needed to be pragmatic. I have a solution. Diane raised an eyebrow. Add Sophie to the trip. I said, just her. Eric and I will stay home. We will sign whatever waiver you want. We will sign a document saying we are in bad standing if that helps your paperwork. But let Sophie go. I leaned forward. And here is the other part. Eric and I will pay for her flight. We will pay for her share of the room. You don't have to touch the trust money for her. You can tell the auditors she is a guest. I looked at them both. It fixes everything. Sophie gets to be with her cousins. You get your photo of all the grandkids. The auditors see the trust money was only used for the approved members. No drama, no public confrontation. It was a generous offer. It was a desperate offer. I was willing to pay to let my daughter be used as a prop in their play, just so she wouldn't feel rejected. Gerald looked up. He looked hopeful. Diane, he said, that could work, if they pay for it personally. It doesn't hit the ledger. Diane didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her eyes were studying my face, searching for something. "No," she said. My heart stopped. "Why?" "Because the other children will ask questions," she said. "Questions?" I asked. "If Sophie comes but her parents don't, the kids will ask why. They will ask why Sophie gets to come for free. Well, effectively free, while their parents had to earn their spots through loyalty." She picked at a piece of lint on her slacks. "And they will ask why Sophie gets special treatment, why she gets to break the rules." I stared at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Special treatment?" I choked out. "Mom, she is the only one who was excluded. If she goes, she isn't getting special treatment. She is getting equal treatment. Not in the eyes of the family," Diane said. "In this family, you earn your place. If I let Sophie come just because you made a fuss, it undermines my authority. It tells Matt and Vanessa that if they complain loud enough, they can get whatever they want." I felt a coldness spread through my veins. It was the temperature of absolute clarity. She didn't care about the audit. She didn't care about the money. She cared about the power. She couldn't let Sophie go because that would mean admitting that I had won. It would mean that her decree, her punishment, had been overturned. "They won't ask why Sophie gets special treatment," I said, my voice shaking. "They will ask why Sophie is being punished." Diane looked me dead in the eye. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. "Sophie isn't being punished. Leah," she said, "you are—" The honesty of it landed like a slap across the face. It hung in the air, vibrating. "You are—" She was punishing an 8-year-old girl to hurt me. She was willing to break my daughter's heart to teach me a lesson about obedience. I looked at my father. He was staring at the table, his face gray. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was monstrous, but he wouldn't stop her. He was just as guilty. His silence was the soil in which her cruelty grew. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands stopped shaking. "Get out," I said. Diane looked up, surprised. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house," I said. I picked up the folder of documents. I didn't throw them. I just closed the folder. "I am done," I said. "I am not going to bargain for a seat at a table that was built to humiliate me. I am not going to beg you to love my daughter." I looked at the participation agreement lying on the table. "And I am formally withdrawing from the Foster Family Trust." Diane laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. "You can't withdraw. You are a beneficiary. I can refuse the benefits." I said, "And I do. I don't want your money. I don't want your trips. I don't want your conditional love. I will not sign another paper. I will not submit to another review. I am taking myself and my daughter out of your jurisdiction." Gerald stood up. "Leah, be reasonable. You are talking about a lot of money. Sophie's college. Sophie's college will be paid for by people who actually care about her." I said, "Or she will take out loans. But she won't take money that requires her mother to crawl." I walked to the front door and opened it. The afternoon sun streamed in, bright and indifferent. "Please leave." Diane stood up slowly. She picked up her purse. She picked up the photo album she had brought as a weapon. She walked to the door. She stopped in the threshold and looked at me. She wasn't sad. She wasn't angry. She looked satisfied. She had pushed me out. She had finally purified the group. I was gone. And now she could reign over the remaining, compliant subjects without my interference. "You are making a big mistake, Leah," she said softly. "I don't think I am." I said. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "Well, if you are walking away," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I suppose you won't be needing our help when Eric's contract ends next month." I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. I stopped breathing. Eric's contract. Eric worked in corporate consulting. His current contract was up for renewal in 30 days. It was a standard procedure, but there had been rumors of budget cuts at his firm. We hadn't told anyone. We hadn't even told Sophie. We had discussed it only in the privacy of our bedroom, late at night, in hushed whispers. "How do you know about that?" I whispered. Diane's smile widened just a fraction. "We hear things," she said. "People talk." She stepped out onto the porch. "Good luck, Leah, you are going to need it." She walked to the car, her heels clicking on the pavement. Gerald followed her. Not looking back, I watched them drive away. I stood in the doorway, the warm air hitting my face. But I felt freezing cold. People talk. But we hadn't talked to people. We hadn't told Matt. We hadn't told Vanessa. I thought about the group chat. I thought about the emails. I thought about the way my phone had been acting sluggish lately. I realized then that the surveillance I had sensed wasn't just gossip. It wasn't just Marla or Vanessa reporting back. Diane knew things she couldn't possibly know. She had been monitoring us. I closed the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I walked back to the dining room table. I looked at the empty chairs. I felt a wave of nausea. But underneath it, a new feeling was taking root. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was the cold, hard clarity of a soldier who finally sees the enemy's position. They had threatened my husband's livelihood. They had spied on my home. They had targeted my child. They wanted a war. They were going to get one, but not the one they expected. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to wait. I picked up the phone and dialed Eric. "Come home," I said. "We have a problem." Eric stood in the center of the kitchen, his hands gripping the back of a dining chair so hard I thought the wood might snap. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. "She knows about the contract," he said. His voice was quiet, but it vibrated with a rage I had rarely seen in him. "Leah, I have not told a soul at my firm. I have not told my own mother." "How does she know?" I sat at the table, staring at the folder of documents I had presented to my parents only an hour ago. The participation agreement stared back at me, a reminder that my life had been under surveillance for years. "She has sources," I said, rubbing my temples. "She always has sources." "This is a violation," Eric said. He let go of the chair and began to pace. "It is not just family drama anymore. This is my career. If she starts spreading rumors that I'm losing my job before I have even secured the renewal, she won't spread it yet," I said. "She is holding it. It is leverage. She dropped it today to show me that if I walk away, she has the power to make our lives difficult. She wants me to be afraid." "Well, it is working," Eric said. He stopped pacing and looked at me. "I am done. Leah, I want out. I want to block their numbers. I want to change the locks. I don't want them near Sophie." I nodded slowly. "I agree. But we can't just disappear." "Why not?" "Because she has already written the script," I said. I stood up and walked over to him. "Don't you see? Marla told me. Diane is telling people I am unstable. She is telling people I am keeping Sophie away because I am having an episode. If we just go silent, if we block them and hide, we prove her right. She will tell the family. See, Leah has cut us off. She is spiraling. She will use our silence to cement her narrative." "So what?" Eric asked. "Let them think what they want. And lose everyone?" I asked. "If she paints me as crazy, I lose Matt. I lose Vanessa. I lose the cousins. Sophie grows up thinking her entire extended family abandoned her because her mother couldn't handle reality. I won't let her do that to my daughter. I won't let her turn me into the villain of Sophie's life. I need to exit on my terms." I said, "I need to make sure the truth is on the record before we walk away." I spent the next hour playing detective. I needed to know how the information about Eric's contract had leaked. My mother was good, but she wasn't a psychic. Someone had talked. I called Matt. He answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. I could hear suitcases zipping in the background. "Hey, Leah," he said. "Look, I can't talk long. We are packing. Mom is freaking out about the luggage weight limits." "Matt," I said, cutting him off, "did you tell Dad about Eric's contract?" The line went silent. The zipping sound stopped. Matt said. "Matt, Look, it wasn't like that," he stammered. "I was talking to Dad last week about the loan. He was grilling me about my finances, asking why I didn't have a backup plan. He started lecturing me about stability, and I tried to deflect." "Deflect how?" I said. It is tough out there for everyone, Dad. Even Eric is worried about his renewal. I didn't mean anything by it. It just slipped out. I was just trying to get him off my back. I closed my eyes. It was exactly what I had suspected. Matt, in a moment of weakness, had offered up my husband's privacy as a sacrificial lamb to get the heat off himself. You gave them ammunition. Matt, I said, Mom just threatened to use that information to hurt us if I don't get in line. Matt let out a strangled noise. She wouldn't do that. She just worries. She threatened us. Matt, I shouted. She told me not to expect any help when the contract ends. She was gloating. I heard a female voice in the background on his end. Vanessa, asking what was wrong. I am sorry. Leah, Matt whispered. I didn't know. I am so sorry. Enjoy Hawaii, I said, and I hung up. I sat there, feeling the betrayal settle into my bones like a damp chill. My brother wasn't evil. He was just compromised. He was so dependent on their approval and their money that he had lost the ability to protect anyone but himself. My phone rang again. It was Marla. I hesitated. Marla was deep in the enemy camp, but curiosity won out. Hello? Leah, Marla said. Her voice was hushed. I am in the car. I just left your mother's house. I didn't say anything. I feel sick. Leah, Marla said, I have been sitting here thinking about what I said to you at the grocery store, about you keeping Sophie away, and I just heard Diane on the phone with the travel agent. Marla said, she was confirming the passenger list. She laughed. Leah, she actually laughed. She said, no, Sophie won't be coming. Her mother is going to have a breakdown any minute now, so it is for the best. I gripped the phone. She is planning something. Marla continued. She was showing me these papers earlier. She called it her insurance policy. She said that if you try to make a scene before the trip, she has paperwork that proves you are mentally unfit. She said, Leah will cave by boarding time because she knows I can ruin her credibility. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Mental unfitness. She was going to weaponize my postpartum depression. She was going to use the fact that I had sought therapy years ago, something I had confided in her during a vulnerable moment, as proof that I was unstable. Marla. I said, why are you telling me this? Because I am a grandmother too, Marla said softly. And I watched her cut Sophie out of that photo album. It wasn't right. It was cruel. I can't be part of that. Thank you, Marla, I said. I hung up. I knew what I had to do. I called Kara Winslow. It was late, but she agreed to see me. I drove to her office, the streetlights blurring in my vision. Kara listened as I explained the threat, the leak, and the smear campaign. She sat back in her chair, tapping a pen against her chin. Okay, she said. Here's the strategy. We don't sue, not yet. A lawsuit takes years. And right now, you are fighting a PR battle within your family. You need to create a record. A record? You need to file a formal request for information regarding the trust, Kara explained, and you need to couple it with a cease and desist regarding the defamation. But we don't mail it. If we mail it, she ignores it until she gets back from Hawaii. So what do? You deliver it, Kara said. You deliver it in front of witnesses. You hand her a document that outlines the falsehoods, the claim that you excluded Sophie, the claim that you are unstable, and demands a retraction. You make it clear that you are not having an episode. You are asserting your legal rights. Kara drafted the letter while I waited. It was cold, precise, and devoid of emotion. It stated the facts, that Sophie Foster had been excluded by the trustees, that the trustees had disseminated false information regarding the reason for said exclusion, and that Leah Foster was formally requesting a full accounting of the trust's charitable family bonding expenditures. I signed it. When do they leave? Kara asked. Tomorrow morning. I said, they are having a send-off breakfast at the Gilded Table before they go to the airport. Kara handed me the folder. Go, she said. Be calm. Be professional. Do not yell. Do not cry. If you cry, she wins. You walk in there. You state your case. You hand over the papers, and you walk out. You show the family that you are the most sane person in the room. The Gilded Table was the kind of restaurant that served eggs Benedict on heated plates and charged $6 for a glass of orange juice. It was my mother's favorite place to hold court. I arrived at 8:15. The parking lot was full. I saw my father's car. I saw Matt's minivan. I saw the rented Sprinter van that would take them to the airport. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing a navy blazer and slacks. My hair was pulled back in a tight, neat bun. I looked like a lawyer. I looked like a woman who had never had an episode in her life. I took a deep breath. I picked up the folder. I walked into the restaurant. The hostess tried to stop me. "Do you have a reservation?" "I am with the Foster party." I said, not breaking stride. I found them in the private dining room at the back. It was a glass-walled room overlooking the garden. They were all there. My parents, Matt and Vanessa, the grandkids, my Aunt Linda, my cousins. It was a table of 20 people. A photographer was circling the table, snapping photos of them raising their mimosa glasses. "Smile," the photographer chirped. Big smiles for Hawaii. My mother was at the head of the table, holding a glass of champagne. She looked radiant. She was in her element. The benevolent queen surrounded by her subjects. I opened the glass door. The sound of laughter spilled out, then abruptly died as heads turned. Matt saw me first. His face went white. He put his fork down. Diane froze. Her glass hovered halfway to her mouth. "Leah?" she said. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. "What are you doing here?" I walked to the end of the table, opposite her. I didn't sit down. I placed my hands on the back of an empty chair. "I am not here to stay," I said. My voice was steady. It projected clearly across the room. "I just wanted to say goodbye, and I wanted to clear up a few things before you all fly off to paradise." Diane stood up. "Leah, this is not the time. We are having a family celebration. If you are going to cause a scene, I am not causing a scene." "Mother," I said, "I am delivering a message." I looked around the table. I looked at my nieces and nephews, who were staring at me with wide eyes. I looked at Vanessa, who was studying her napkin. I looked at my father, who was staring at his plate. "I want everyone to know why Sophie isn't here," I said. Diane moved to intercept me. She signaled the photographer to stop. "Leah, stop it," she hissed. "Not in front of the children." I ignored her. "Sophie is not here because she was not invited." I said, "I spoke to the cousins now. I want you guys to know that Sophie loves you. She didn't choose to stay home. She wasn't sick. She wasn't not ready. Grandma and Grandpa decided she wasn't allowed to come." A gasp went around the table. Aunt Linda put her hand to her mouth. "That is a lie," Diane shouted. She was losing her composure. She stepped toward me. "Leah, you are unwell. You are making things up. This is exactly why we couldn't bring you. You are having a breakdown." I didn't flinch. I reached into my folder. I pulled out the participation agreement. "Is this a breakdown?" I asked, holding up the document. "Is this contract, which you made me sign, a hallucination? The one that says you can withhold family benefits if I don't obey your orders?" I pulled out the email printouts. "Is this email, where you told Marla you were going to paint me as unstable to protect your reputation, a breakdown?" I tossed the papers onto the table. They slid across the white tablecloth, knocking over a salt shaker. "I am not unstable. Diane," I said, "I am just the only one who refuses to be bought." Diane lunged for the papers. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out right now!" She turned to Gerald. "Gerald, do something! She is ruining it!" Gerald stood up. He looked pale. His hands were trembling. He looked from Diane, who was red-faced and frantic, to me, standing calm and cold. He looked at the papers on the table. "Gerald!" Diane shrieked. "Tell them she is lying!" Gerald opened his mouth. He closed it. Then, he looked at the photographer. "Leave us," he said. The photographer scurried out. Gerald looked at the family. "She isn't lying," he said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush bone. Diane turned to him slowly. "What did you say?" "She isn't lying." Gerald repeated. His voice was quiet, but it was the first time in 30 years I had heard him speak without checking with her first. "We excluded Sophie," he said, addressing the table. "We did it. Why?" Aunt Linda asked. Her voice was small. "Why would you do that?" "Gerald?" "Because we had to," Gerald said. He sank back into his chair, looking defeated. "Because of the audit." Diane slammed her hand on the table. "Gerald! Shut up! I am tired." "Diane!" Gerald shouted back. The sudden volume made everyone jump. "I am tired of the lies. I am tired of the juggling." He looked at me. "We are under audit," he said to the room. "The trust is being investigated. We spent money we shouldn't have spent. We classified things incorrectly. We needed this trip to look like a perfect, compliant, charitable retreat to justify the expense. We couldn't risk Leah being there because she asked questions, and we couldn't risk canceling it because the deposit was non-refundable and the refund would trigger a flag." He put his head in his hands. "It is all about the money," he whispered. "It is always about the money. We are broke. We are leveraged to the hilt. The house, the cars. It is all debt." The room was spinning. I watched my brother Matt. His mouth was open. He was realizing that the mortgage bailout he had sold his soul for was likely money that didn't even really exist. Vanessa looked sick. Diane stood there, breathing hard. Her perfect image had shattered. The rich, benevolent matriarch was gone, replaced by a desperate woman running a shell game. I looked at her. "It is over. Mom," I said, "the show is over." Diane looked around the room. She saw the shock on Linda's face. She saw the confusion on the grandkids' faces. She saw the judgment. She had lost. And then, she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator who realizes that if they are going to die, they might as well take everyone else with them. "Fine," she said. She smoothed her cardigan. Her voice became eerily calm. "If you want the truth, let's have the truth." She looked at Gerald. "You are pathetic." She spat. "You always were." She turned to me. "You think you are so righteous. Leah, you think you are the victim here, the poor, excluded daughter, the martyr." She walked around the table until she was standing inches from me. She smelled of mimosa and venom. "You want to know why I really excluded Sophie?" she asked softly. I stared at her. "Because of the audit." I said, "Dad just said it. That was his reason." She said, "That was the excuse I gave him to make him agree to it." She leaned in closer. "But my reason was different." She turned to the room. She raised her voice, making sure every cousin, every child, every waiter hovering in the hallway could hear. "Sophie isn't excluded because of Sophie," she announced, "and she isn't excluded because of the money." She paused for effect. "She is excluded because Leah isn't who you all think she is." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Diane laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "You all think Leah is just the rebellious daughter." She said, "The one who wanted to make it on her own, the one who has boundaries." She looked at Eric, who had just walked into the room behind me. Having parked the car, "Ask her," Diane said to Eric. "Ask your wife about what happened the summer she turned 19. Ask her why there are sealed records in the county clerk's office." My blood ran cold. 19. I stared at her. She couldn't know. Nobody knew. "Ask her," Diane continued, her voice rising in triumph, "why we really keep her on a short leash. It isn't because we are controlling. It is because we know what she is capable of. We know what she did." She picked up her purse from the table. She picked up her sunglasses. She looked at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hate. "I have protected you for 14 years. Leah, I have kept your secret. I have let you play the victim while I cleaned up your mess. But if you want to destroy this family, if you want to expose us, then everything comes out." She put her sunglasses on. She turned to the family, who were sitting in stunned, terrified silence. "I am going to the airport," she said. "Anyone who wants to come to Hawaii is welcome. Anyone who wants to stay here and listen to her, well, that is your choice." She walked out of the room. Her heels clicked on the tile floor, fading away into the restaurant. Gerald didn't move. Matt didn't move. The room was silent. I stood there, my hand gripping the back of the chair. I could feel Eric's eyes on my back. I could feel the weight of 20 stares. The summer I turned 19, the secret I had buried so deep, I had almost forgotten it was there. She hadn't just ruined the trip. She hadn't just ruined the breakfast. She had opened a door I had spent my entire adult life trying to keep closed. And now, everyone was waiting for me to walk through it. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you felt the tension and the stakes of Leah's battle. Family secrets are often the heaviest burdens we carry. And sometimes, the price of truth is higher than we ever imagine. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this and want to find out what happens next, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are many more layers to uncover in the Foster family saga. Please share your thoughts in the comments in English. Do you think Leah should have stayed silent? What do you think Diane is referring to about Leah's past? I can't wait to read your theories. Until next time.